all of us. As you said, I grew up in Sarasota. My family is originally from Philadelphia, for those of you that were hearing the Philadelphia Eagles references before we started. Sorry, Dan. We were a family. Oh, shoot. I'm unmuted, I think.
Yeah, you're perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
We came here when I was about 3, and I did grow up here and went to high school here, then moved to DC for college, and then Philadelphia. And we spent so we sort of went back to Philadelphia. I spent a number of years there for training, and then we came back down here in 2012. When I moved back down here, I heard the expression boomerang. So those are people that were raised in Sarasota, lived up north, got tired of the snow, and came back down here. So that was us. And when I moved back down here, I moved with my husband and then 2 children. We now have 3. So as Rabbi Glickman said, I have 3 kids, a rising high schooler, a rising middle schooler, and a rising second grader. All 3 of them attended Community Day. My oldest just graduated via Zoom, and he's going to Riverview in whatever shape or form that will be in August. And the other 2 are going to be at Community Day. So I'm a very proud Community Day parent, and also a member of the Jewish community here. My oldest, was bar mitzvahed a year ago in June at Temple Beth Shalom, and we try to stay active in a variety of different things. My husband is the team dentist for Riverview, so we've been active in the Riverview community even before my son started there. I guess I could keep talking about my professional experience, but I have a feeling that will probably come up in questions. I don't know, is there any other stuff you want me to kind of talk about, or? Oh wait, hold on. You're muted. You're muted.
You
Oh,
can see
yeah.
why generally, I'm not the one in charge, organizing all this. No, I think that's great. Thank you. And I do think hopefully we'll get to hear more about your professional experience as we continue. But talking about your professional experience and the number of years you've been in practice and all of the kids, adolescents, that you've been treating. Taking back, I know it seems as if we've been in this pandemic, for the last billion years. But, thinking back, looking back, I'm wondering, before the pandemic, what were some of the most common issues that you found yourself treating in middle school and in high school students?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great place to start. And I probably most people know this, but I don't want to assume. Psychiatrists, which is what I do, is we're actually medical doctors. We go to medical school, and we then do training, subspecialty training in both psychiatry, and then in my case, I did a subspecialty or fellowship in child and adolescent psychiatry. So typically, when people come to see me, they're usually referred by someone, usually either a pediatrician, primary care doctor, or a therapist. And most of the common issues I would be treating, a lot of ADHD, so attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, is a common reason for referral for medication management. Anxiety, depression. I would say those were probably the primary issues. People, might get, again, referred by either a therapist or primary care doctor, for medication management or sort of further evaluation.
Good. And how have you found these particular issues to be amplified during the pandemic?
So I would say, for the most part, anything that was there has sort of been amplified. There's kids who were struggling in school often continue to struggle in an online setting. There were very few, I just, even watching my own kids, they managed it, they navigated it, but they really didn't like it. So I would say, for kids that had pre-existing issues with attention or with school performance, that was definitely amplified by having to do schoolwork online. Anxiety, interestingly, could go either way. Certainly, I've had a lot of people tell me if they were already anxious about body symptoms, for example. One of the common things we see with anxiety is what I call somatic symptoms. So these are the people that, that get headaches, that get stomach aches, they have a physical symptom and then they over focus on it. That's very, very common with anxiety. And that, as you might imagine, has really become amplified in the setting of a pandemic where everybody is talking about, oh, shortness of breath, cough, do you have a fever, all of these things. So people are sort of who are already hyper focused or over focused on a symptom are going to be over focused on that. I will say that I do treat some kids that have a lot of anxiety about school, whether it's social anxiety, they are nervous around their peers, they don't know what to say, they have a hard time making friends, they're nervous about speaking up in class. For that particular group of kids, online learning was great. They don't ever want to go back to school, which isn't not necessarily a good thing, but I've certainly had a handful of kids where I see them for a medication visit and the parents are going, everything's great. So there are definitely some kids that have done well, but I would say overall any of those things that I was treating before have become amplified. Depression, isolation, boredom, frustration, and all of these things that we're all experiencing right now have sort of become amplified.
Good, thank you. Have you seen any new issues that have emerged during the pandemic, either new issues in sort of existing patients or, getting calls from new patients with problems that you've seen, that are kind of unique during the pandemic?
Yeah, I would say there, when I was reading, and later at sort of at the conclusion, I can give people some resources or some, if they're interested, there's a lot of amazing information on the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry website. That's a mouthful. It's ACAP, we call it, but they have a lot of really good resources. And common themes when I was reading are isolation and uncertainty. And pretty much if you talk to almost anybody right now, we're all dealing with that. The uncertainty, when is this going to end? How is this going to look in August? How is this going to look in December? Even in my own family, we have a wedding coming in November and there's uncertainty around that and we're all struggling with that. And isolation. And I think the struggle, and I know we're going to touch on that later, but as a parent, we're sort of being told we have to isolate, right? Isolate our kids, isolate ourselves, and then how do we do that without making them more miserable? So those are two sort of common themes. And then some other issues that have come up are really interesting. There's trauma. A lot of the information I was looking at trauma. Trauma for children of frontline workers, for example, police officers, nurses, doctors, people who are, going to work in an ICU. I met with a little boy this week, actually, whose mother is in it, is a hospitalist intensivist, basically works in the ICU. And, every day he's asking, is mommy going to come home? Is she going to get sick? Those types of things. So that real trauma has really come up. The other thing that is an issue among seriously mentally ill folks, and that's probably not so much what we're talking about tonight, but it's probably worth talking about, just sort of touching on, is that folks that really struggle with chronic mental illness, with paranoia, with severe anxiety to the fact that they're housebound, those things are really becoming worse. Paranoia particularly. You go out, everybody's wearing a mask. Why are they wearing a mask? What are they hiding from me? Again, it's sort of tapping into fears for people who are already having, thoughts that are a little bit distorted, for example. Privacy issues have come up. Those of us, pretty much all of us in mental health, whether it be therapists or psychiatrists, are working mostly online or exclusively online at this point. And that, as you might imagine, brings up privacy issues. It's not a secure environment. You don't know who's outside. I mean, even in my own house, my family knows not to bother me if the door's shut, but it's privacy issues all around. That's one of the complications of working in this way. The other thing, again, I wouldn't say it's a new issue, but it probably has become amplified with COVID, is a lot of, again, getting back to anxiety, people with anxiety have a lot of physical symptoms. Their chest is tight, they're short of breath. Often, if people describe a panic attack, that's one of the things they describe. My chest is tight, I feel like I can't breathe, I'm sweating, all of these things that we see with panic attacks. And, if you hear about that, you're like, wow, that sounds like COVID. You're short of breath, you're sweating, those kinds of things. So not wanting to sort of overly reassure, but also not wanting to sort of focus a lot on physical symptoms right now is really sort of a very delicate balance.
It's interesting to think about. You're right. Like some of the things that we're supposed to be watching out for to make sure that we're staying physically healthy could actually be, setting back our mental health in that way.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, when you talk about trauma, when you talk about how, this can make certain issues worse in middle and high school students, how it can even introduce new issues, for our kids. What about, as if it weren't already difficult enough being an adolescent, between being a teenager. How have you found the pandemic to interrupt or to impact some of the regular developmental milestones of middle and high school students?
Yeah, and I think that is, it's sort of something I'm watching firsthand in my own family. And as I was kind of preparing for this talk, I was thinking back, one of my teachers in fellowship, she was an older woman, very experienced. Unfortunately, she's passed away, but she said to me, and I was pregnant with my first during fellowship, and I was about to have a baby, and everybody was focused on the baby. And she said to me, you're not going to really understand development until you're a parent. Because when you're in fellowship, you're memorizing milestones. At what age do they walk? At what age do they talk? What's this supposed to happen? All of these things that we are thinking about in terms of milestones. You learn them, you forget them, you learn them, you forget them. A lot of medicine is that you learn and forget and learn and forget. Anyway, she said, you're really not going to understand any of these developmental milestones until you're a parent. So, bringing back to your question, I'm sort of watching this firsthand with my own. And it's hard. I think one of the big things in this age group, and we're focusing tonight on middle school and up, so basically 6-year-olds and up, I'm sorry, sixth grader, 12-year-olds and up. And the normal milestones is that they are, at that point, they sort of separate a little bit from their parents and their families and move to social stuff. They're sort of trying to find their independence. I talk to my families that I work with about teenagerhood is I hate you, now drive me to the mall. It's go away, come back, I need you. Go away, come back, I need you. And that is all interrupted right now, because a lot of us are telling our kids, well, you can't socialize, it's not safe. Or, we're telling them to get off their electronics, but we're saying, well, you can't really see your friends, so just FaceTime with them. So a lot of those normal things that we would want our kids to be doing, we're either told it's not safe, we're worried it's not safe, or we're just sort of trying to navigate all of those things. So I would say independence is probably the biggest disruption. And just those normal milestones. I mean, all of these high schoolers that, couldn't do their high school graduation, they did it on Zoom, or, our 8th graders, Dan's daughter, my son, they had an amazing graduation, but it was all on Zoom, and all of these sort of milestones that they were anticipating. They were supposed to go on a class trip. They raised money. They were learning how to plan all of these things. And again, fostering independence. And then it all got, cut off by this. So I think it was, that part of it was really difficult. And then you sort of think, okay, how do we eventually get them back to that learning independence?
Wow. So, and what you're talking about, the trauma of it and the changes, it really happened at the end of the school year. And I think, at least just speaking for myself, we kind of hoped, okay, we're going to give up these 2 months. Things are going to be, crazy and challenging. But then by the summer, things will be better.
Okay,
I feel like, what we're finding, at least I think for many of us, even though outside things might be opening and things might be officially, we're allowed to go to restaurants, allowed to go to the gym, allowed to, resume more normal lives, that there's a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety about doing so. And I think for our middle high school students, especially, some of the things that, you know, they had kind of looked forward to over the summer, they were giving up, yes, the spring of their year, but
Yeah.
during the summer, they'd be able to have summer camp, they'd be able to have vacations, they'd be able to have these, you know, sort of lazy, carefree days. And all of a sudden, no, those things aren't happening either.
Yeah.
Does that increase the impact on our kids? And can you just say a few words about that?
Yeah, I think there's, and again, I'm speaking really heavily to, you know, my experience watching my own children, as also with some of my patients, is that there was a grieving process. I was talking, I think it was last week, to a kiddo that graduated, and she's going to UCF, and it's going to be online, but um, she started crying when she was telling me that she didn't have closure. You know, she left school in March not knowing that she was never coming back to that school. And that really sort of hit home for me. Um, and I just, you know, again, watching, you know, my own kid sort of lose all of these things that he expected to go through, it was almost like a grieving process. You know, if you know, think about the stages of grief, you know, the anger and denial, and you know, you gradually get to acceptance. But I do think that that was a process. They were grieving this, and now they're, a lot of them, I'm speaking again about my own, are just sort of, in a way, they're resigned to it. But it's this uncertainty. What comes next? How does this work? When is it okay? The question I'm getting a lot of is, when does this go away? When do things get back to normal? And, you know, the hard thing is that's a question we all want to know, and nobody knows the answer to.
Yeah. That is, I mean, I think it's hard enough for us as adults. So to imagine, you know, how much more so for our kids. And, you know, for us, I feel like it's been such a difficult, we're seeing about it today. It's been a little over 4 months, which has been really hard for my husband and me. And we're in our late 40s. So as a percentage of our lifetime, it's just not that much. And then you think about our kids, like it's a huge
Right.
percent, you know, of their lives that has sort of been upended in this way. And yeah, as you said, with no end in sight. So thank you. It's an unfortunate insight, but, you know, thank you. It's a good one to hear and to think about. I'm wondering, we've talked a lot about, you know, the effect of the pandemic so far on children and upon, you know, their mental health and those challenges. What impacts of the pandemic have you seen, more specifically, I guess, or I guess more generally, what impacts have you seen on family relationships as a whole, between siblings and parents, between parents and children?
If only you'd had a camera in our playroom earlier today with my older two screaming at each other. No, I think what I found for the most part, and even in my own, again, in my own family and with the kids I work with, is that what the pre-existing issues or conflicts, and look, we all have them, you know, nobody's family is perfect. It doesn't matter how perfect everybody looks on Instagram. Nobody's family is perfect. What I tell the families I work with is everybody's got something. Everybody's got something that they're dealing with. Some people have big somethings, some people have little somethings, but everybody's got something, and nobody's life is perfect. So I think that whatever pre-existing conflicts were there, I think are now under a microscope. Because there's more time together. And I would say overall, what I've noticed with, you know, my family, my friends, and of course the families I work with, is that there has been more conflict. On the flip side, you know, I think there is also more together time. My husband is fond of telling the story of about a week, it was probably in February, a week or two really before things totally went south. You know, we were in the middle of a mile a minute, little league and dance and the orchestra and this and that and running and, you know, spreadsheets, who's going where, who's picking up whom. And it was really exhausting. And he looked at me, he goes, can't we just take a break from all of this? Like, I just need, you know, like just a break. And yeah, well, we're in the middle of Little League, we're in the middle of this, we can't, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then it was probably like 3 weeks after that when everything started shutting down. And I sort of keep saying to him, well, be careful what you wish for. But in some ways, I think that calmer lifestyle has been nice. right? It's enabled us to maybe have more conversations, enables us to have more family dinners, you know, that not that rush after school, go to this activity, run here, without that, you know, there's you know, there's sort of a lower level of chaos. So I think that if you look for a silver lining, that might be the silver lining, you know, that there is more family time, there's more, you know, there's more opportunity to communicate, there's a little more downtime, family game night, you know, family movie night, whatever that is.
Good. Thank you. That is a good way to, to look for it, to look for the silver lining here. And I just want to say, like, thank you for saying, no one is perfect no matter how they look on Instagram, because I feel like I can speak for myself. Like, that's one of the things that's been, hard sometimes is that you look on Facebook or you look on Instagram, it looks like everybody's really having fun. And it's like,
Yeah.
why aren't they anxious? Like, why aren't they worried? Why aren't their kids, fighting? It looks like everyone's having this perfect time. And then sometimes you
Right.
talk to them and it turns out, oh, like, they are still having problems every day. So on one hand, I feel like it's so important to, as you said, to think about the bright side, like, family game night and family dinners, and to look for the positives, but then also just to, kind of be aware that just because, people are trying to look on the bright side, it doesn't mean that, everybody except for us, is having a fantastic time. So thank you. I just got a question, if I can throw this in,
Please.
for Lindsay, because I think it's a great question. How do you suggest supporting our kids when the downtime and the communication times lessen? That it's going to happen eventually. How are we going to help our kids shift back into some semblance of normal life?
Yeah, I think that that's a great question. And that's been something I've been trying to kind of figure out on my own, because, you know, and I think I know that there are some people are sending, you know, their kids to activities, and we've just chosen to not send our kids to do anything this summer. So there is a lot of downtime right now. There's a lot of sleeping in, there's a lot of staying up late, which, you know, I know it's sort of like do as I say, not as I do. You know, I'm a big fan of telling everybody to stay in routine and go to bed on time. And I'm, you know, not quite as good as I should be about implementing that in my own house. But in any case, you know, when we are trying to get back to routine, I think communication is really, really important. You know, what does this look like when this is all over, in quotes? Who knows? I don't think any of us know. But I think having a really open dialogue, you know, particularly with your older kids, what's important, you know, yes, we realize that a lot of this was miserable and you hated it, but was there anything that you did like? What went well? What didn't go well? And how do we sort of replicate that? One thing we instituted in my family, what, you know, back in the good old days where the kids were going to school and we had to get up and drive them to school, we had like a team meeting, a family meeting, you know, for 5 minutes in the morning. Just, okay, who's got what, who's got a big, you know, who's got a big day, who's got a test, who's got baseball practice after school, whatever that is, and just kind of helped keep everybody organized. I think that is going to be important, and again, trying at least a little bit to model some semblance of normalcy in the summer. You know, in other words, if kids have summer work to do, okay, try to get them up on time. You know, do your summer work, even if it's for 30 minutes. Try to get in some semblance of a routine now, knowing that it's not going to be fully normal, but just, you know, trying to sort of model some of that now.
Good. Thank you. When you talk about, wanting to have, well, looking ahead to returning to normalcy, I feel like for some of us now, there's really a conflict between our kids' mental and emotional readiness. And you could even say, really their need to return to some kind of normal life, but at the same time that there are real concerns about physical health and safety for them, and also, for what they might be bringing home to vulnerable family members. So I'm wondering if you could talk about that a little bit, about how we as parents can balance our real legitimate and important concerns about physical health and safety with our concern for our mental health and our children's mental health.
Yeah, that is an amazing question. And I think that is something that we're all grappling with right now. What I will say, and I say this to myself every single day, is that, you know, everybody's got a slightly different I want to say level of comfort. Everybody's situation is different. Like you said, some people have vulnerable family members, some people have children or parents with chronic medical issues. Some people, they've done well online and they want, in terms of schooling. So I think coming into it with the mindset of, okay, what's going to work for our family doesn't necessarily work for someone else's family. And trying so hard, and I do this for myself, it's like, okay, I can't control anybody else's choices. I can't control what so and so does with their kid and sends their kid to camp, and or doesn't send their kid to camp, or goes to Publix without a mask. And we can go on forever about that. I can't control any of that. I can only control the choices that I'm making with my body and with my family. And so putting that out there, knowing that what your neighbor does with their kids might be very different than what you're comfortable with, because their situation is not your situation. And their profession is not your profession. Everybody's situation is different. My husband's a dentist. He's seeing patients every single day in person, in full on PPE, and like an astronaut suit basically, but he's with patients. I have the luxury, fortunately, that I'm able to see people online, so I don't have that same level of risk. Yet he's in our house, he's bringing, much as I wanted to move him to another house, that idea didn't didn't fly real well. So I'm kidding, sort of, in case he's watching this. But anyway, I guess what I'm saying is you're asking a really important question, is how to mitigate this. And in some cases, yes, you realize that the emotional risk of maybe keeping our kids isolated, maybe we even go so far as to keeping our kids from school, that does carry some level of emotional risk, and then sort of trying to temper that with the physical risk. And we know there are some things that we can do to mitigate physical risk. We know that masks work, we know that hand washing works, we know that distance, we know that all of these things work. I think it becomes very difficult because you can't always trust your kids to do that, not because they're bad kids, but because they're kids,
Right.
and they don't have the same level of maturity or judgment that an adult has. And again, that knowing that some people are going to make different choices, and then really having that open discussion with your kids. That was one other thing is you can ask your kids, what do you understand of this? Particularly with a teenager, that they probably do have some understanding of it. They can watch the news a little bit, maybe not all the time, 24/7, but they can have some information about it, and sort of asking them what their understanding of it is. And what do they think that they can do to help keep the family safe might be a way to phrase it.
Good. I feel like that's a really kind of important segue into something else I wanted to ask you about, which is, are there particular ways of communicating with our middle and our high school students that will help them understand our concerns and kind of help them feel like we're all on the same team, rather than, we the parents are working against them, we the parents are trying to stifle them or punish them? Are there ways that we can speak, phrases we can use, just things that we can do to kind of bring everybody together, so it's not parent against child, it's family against the virus?
Yeah, no, and I love that. That's a great way to put it, family against the virus. I use that example a lot with kids when I'm talking about cell phones. Like, again, what we always tell people, okay, turn off your cell phones and iPads at 9 o'clock or whatever it is. And I'll say to the teenagers, that's not us trying to punish you. That's trying to protect your sleep. That's trying to, to keep you healthy. That's not a punishment. And I think that's a really important thing to understand. Look, we're not keeping you quarantined or isolated or not letting you see your friends because we're mad at you. Teenagers, I think, in general, are old enough to understand that. They may not like it, but they can probably understand it. And I agree with what you're saying. You just say, look, this is a family problem. This is a community problem. This is a world problem right now. So what can we as a family do? And start that conversation really with the teenagers with very open-ended questions. What's your understanding of what's going on here? What can we do together? And then I think an important thing, again, so that they don't feel like they're being punished, is to validate their experience. Yes, this sucks. This is really frustrating. I'm so sad for you too. And model, even model to them that, you know what? We're all entitled to have a bad day and be frustrated by this and be sad and be missing our friends and missing these experiences. So to absolutely validate their experience and empathize, it is really, really important, kind of as a start.
Thank you. I think it's really important to remember, all of that. I had, let's see. Oh, Amy Neese just added something. Amy, I want to share this, but you sent it to me privately. So can you send me another private message? Let me know if it's okay to share this, because I think it's really worth doing so. Let's see, I haven't heard from her yet, but we'll find out. But in the meantime, I had another question from Judy Tebow that I wanted to ask, which is, again, kind of talking about, what this impact might look like as we continue, as we hopefully at some point, continue through it and get through it. Judy wonders, how difficult is this isolation going to be on keeping our kids, our middle high schoolers, up with the physical and with the learning milestones that, might be impacted by this time?
Yeah, I think it is going to be really difficult. And I think we know it's going to be difficult. I think we don't know how difficult it's going to be. And that's every time and again, I as a parent have my own anxiety about all of this and try to keep it in check. But I always say to myself, okay, there's no template for this because we've never been through it before.
Mhm.
And that I think is a really hard thing, especially, you when you're trained in medicine and medical school, you like a roadmap. You're like, okay, somebody has this, you do this. Somebody has this, you do this. Somebody does this, you check this lab. So you like to have a template and a roadmap. That's also kind of just how I am. That's how my brain works. And there is like zero template for this. And that's, I think, a hard thing. And so I have to remind
Oh, wait.
myself of that when I have anxiety. And then I also have to say that, oh, I was just gonna say that we're all in this process together, right? In other words, it's not like so and so's kid is way ahead because they were in school and mine wasn't. You know what I'm saying? Like everybody last year was out of school. So I was just gonna say that the only good thing about this is that everybody's got those same worries about their kid in terms of milestones. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I just wanted to sort of
No,
finish that thought.
no, I just want to say you froze for a second and I was worried,
Oh,
but after I was about to say you froze, you got right back. So we're
okay, okay.
going to continue. I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, in terms of that, yes, I think it is going to be difficult. And, there's probably a lot of educators that have some really strong opinions about, learning and milestones and things like that. Interestingly, as a side note, the American Academy of Pediatrics, which is sort of the governing academy of pediatricians, spoke out strongly in favor of kids returning to school for basically that exact reason, that they were concerned about the detrimental effects to the physical milestones and the learning milestones, for kids being out of school. So that's just sort of an interesting side note. And again, I think we all probably have opinions and anxieties and wondering what that's going to look like. But again, the fact that the American Academy of Pediatrics put that out there, I think is worth mentioning.
Yeah, no, thank you. And actually that goes, Amy Neese just gave me permission to share. This is something really goes what we were talking about a moment ago with the issue you just brought up about the reopening of schools. Amy said that even though they want their normal life to resume, she can see in her own children a sense of disappointment and frustration when she sees people pushing for actions that they do not feel like it passes their reasonableness test, like the idea of reopening too quickly, the edict that, schools must be reopened at any cost. And I'm just wondering if you can say a few words about, about that in terms of, I feel like for many of us and I can say, for my own teenagers too, and I can't be, the only one, that there is, I think, a loss of trust sometimes in local officials and in those who are supposed to, have our best interests at heart, like a sense of, can we really trust those who, those who are in authority? And I'm wondering if you can say a few words about that, what the effect might be for them in the short term and maybe in the long term as well.
The effect on the kids of I guess I want to make sure I understood what Amy was asking in terms of uh, maybe she can just clarify her question because I want to make sure that I answer it.
Yes, Amy, where did you, oh, there you are, here. Amy, I was asking, oh, there you are, good.
It wasn't really a question, more that, I think oftentimes people talk about their kids as bystanders, and I don't
Hmm.
see my kids as bystanders. My kids have eyes and they hear, and they go to a school that tells them to think. And, they listen to their leaders and they listen to the news and they hear what's going on and they make their own assessments. And there are times that even though they want their own life, they hear what these people are talking about and they're like, what is wrong with them? Or, what
Yeah.
are they thinking? And my kids, they understand what they need to do to protect themselves. But it goes with what Elaine said about, this sense of trust or this sense of confidence or this sense of this does not pass the smell test for them personally. And, I don't know that I can tell them otherwise, because it doesn't necessarily pass the smell test for me either, with some of the things that are being put out there. So that was more, they're thinking beings. It's not like
Yeah.
they're passive in this.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I would continue to encourage to have those dialogues, and again, without getting too political, I know, we've seen a lot of things that concern us. I mean, even my oldest has said it on a number of occasions, he'll see huge crowds of people grouped together, not social distancing, not wearing masks. He'll see, people just either on the news or wherever, people really not making what we would consider to be safe choices. And he gets angry. He says, they're making this worse for all of us, right? They're making it so that I can't go back to school. Again, it's sort of all about him, but that's very appropriate for a teenager. It's not all about him. He knows that, but he's personalizing that. Their behavior is making it so that I can't do the things that I want to do. I can't hang out with my friends. I can't go back to school. So I think, Amy, to speak to your question, it's they are old enough to have their own opinions. And that's where I think, as a parent, having that dialogue is super important. Having, validating their concerns and just saying, again, we can't control what other people are doing. We can only control what we're doing in our family and the decisions that we're making and trying to stay safe, and really just kind of having an open dialogue, and asking lots of questions. I always find, even with my own children or with my patients, if I don't know what to say, I just ask questions. I just keep asking questions, because you get a lot of information that way.
That's actually super helpful. Thank you, because that kind of leads into something else I wanted to ask you about, which is, what are some things that we as parents might be doing or saying that we think are helpful, but are really not helpful?
Yeah.
And what might we say or do instead?
Yeah, no, it's funny, because when you had sort of given me a little heads up about some of the questions you want to talk about, and so I actually asked my son that. I said, "What have I said to you that's really not helpful?" His response, "Mom, everything you say is helpful."
Oh, that's such a great son.
Yeah, he's a great son. I don't think he was being totally honest, but he didn't want to hurt my feelings. So I'm sure that everything I say is not helpful. Um, I'm 100% sure of that. One of the things I always tell, in general, my parents, families that I work with, particularly of anxious kids, um, our gut instinct is to reassure our children, right? If you hear your kid worrying, don't worry, it'll be fine. And telling an anxious kid don't worry is probably not helpful, right? But sort of opening that dialogue, giving them permission to worry, but maybe in a constructive way, it is more helpful. So again, kind of hearing where they're at. If you're saying don't worry, everything will be fine, that probably isn't cutting it for them, because they're going, wait, this has been 4 months, everything is not fine, right? So I think either trying to sort of minimize their experience is probably not helpful. On the opposite extreme, catastrophizing is also probably not helpful, right? So that fine line of, oh my God, we're all going to die, the ICUs are going to run out of beds, going down that road, that's probably not helpful either. So sort of having that fine, that fine line in again, sort of meeting them where they are.
Thank you. That's great. I think that's true. I remember when my kids were really, really little, that was one of the things that we were told, if your child falls down and hurts themselves, don't cry, that didn't hurt, because indeed might have hurt, and I think
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
important to think about now that sometimes when we want to reassure and take away the pain and make sure everything's okay, it really means that we're erasing their experience and not giving them the opportunity to come to us. So I think that's actually really helpful. Thank you. Not to tell them not to worry, but to hear that they're worried. And I like what you said about help them to, sort of worry in a more productive, way. Thank you.
One of the things, just really quick, I wanted to
No,
add
not
about
thank you.
worrying more productive,
Yeah,
sometimes what's really helpful is, if you're dealing with a teen who's got a lot of worries, is just say, okay, let's put them all out on paper. Let's write them all down, and let's have a time of day where we talk about it. Bedtime is a bad time of day to talk about worries because it leads to insomnia. But letting them do it in a really constructive way, and then say, okay, we've had this time, let's try to move on to something a little more more productive. So again, sort of giving them a space to do it.
good. Thank you. I like that a lot. Oh, I'm outside and there's a plane flying by, so I apologize if it's hard to hear for a second. But I wanted to ask you, are there ways that we can tell? Obviously, this plane's going by. Okay. Obviously, this is an extremely difficult time. As we've said, and difficult, on our kids with the boredom, the isolation, the frustration. I guess what I'd really like to know, and I think probably a lot of us would want to know also, is are there ways that we could tell if our kids are bored, unhappy, and frustrated within, I guess, what we call like normal limits?
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
bored, unhappy, and frustrated because it's a boring, unhappy, frustrating situation. Or if they really are in need of professional interventions and professional care. What are some ways we might, be able to tell?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. And that is probably the number one question I'm asked as a psychiatrist, even in non-COVID times, is how do I know, is this just a normal moody teen? Teenagers are moody, or is this something more serious that I need to pay attention to? Um, Again, in sort of non-COVID times, I always tell people function is the most important thing that you look at. If your teenager is grumpy and rolling his or her eyes at you, but is still socializing appropriately, eating and sleeping and doing well in school and doing all the activities and participating with family, and is really functioning in their normal space, then it's probably okay. If there's a decline in functions, a straight A student who's suddenly getting C's and D's, a good sleeper who's suddenly up all night, not sleeping, online, whatevering, high level severe irritability, those are all sort of markers that something more may be going on. Now, as you asked, we're looking at it through the lens of COVID, right? The lens of, well, there's not a lot of activities right now. As I mentioned, my kids are doing nothing. They are going to be online more because there's less to do. If they want to socialize with their friends, they're going to have to do it online. So definitely we're sort of looking at things through a new lens now. Some of the same principles apply. Insomnia and sleep issues are probably one of the main things that I'm asked about probably on a daily basis. But if you've got a kid who was normally a really good sleeper and is all of a sudden not sleeping well, that's probably a red flag that there's something more going on. Eating, appetite changes, losing a lot of weight, gaining a lot of weight, just any sort of major changes in that's probably a red flag. Irritability to the point where they're getting aggressive. Now, again, anybody that's got a teenager right now has had, probably a moody teenager here and there, crying, frustrated, etc. Fine. But, if you're really seeing an escalation to the point, holes in walls, door slamming, things getting really like, wow, this is not my kid. That's when I would say, okay, that's something that probably requires professional attention. We talk about, there's something in psychiatry called an adjustment disorder, right? Where people are having appropriate responses to a stressful situation. And right now, this is an incredibly stressful situation. I don't think there's a single person who hasn't been touched in some way by the level of stress right now. But again, you're looking for sort of normal reactions, and you feel like, wow, if this reaction is really out of the range of what I would expect, that probably requires some professional attention. If these kids suddenly, they don't want to talk to their friends, whether it's phone, text, FaceTime, whatever, if during schoolwork they're refusing to do schoolwork, staying in their room 24/7, these are all red flags. I always tell parents of teenagers, please don't let your kids stay in the room all the time, for a lot of different reasons. First of all, it doesn't help with feeling isolated and sad. You know, from a safety standpoint, you know, if your kid's in their room 24/7, you don't really know what they're doing, and you need to sort of have eyes on what they're doing. But again, just in terms of this isolation and boredom, that's not going to help. So I always, you know, out of the room, even if you're not talking to anybody in your family, out of the bedroom, that kind of thing.
Thank you. And when they do come out of the bedroom, you know, whether they want to or whether, you know, it's under duress, do you have suggestions on how we can keep communication open during this time? Because on one hand, I think we're spending more time with our teens maybe and tweens than we ever have before.
Yeah.
But on the other
Yeah.
hand, it's strained time for, you know, kind of a quality time and communication. Do you have any hints about how we can keep our communication open during the pandemic?
No, I think that that's really good, and I think that that might be different for every family. Again, something that's worked really well in my family is, you know, my husband calls it a team meeting because that's what he does at his office with his staff. But we sort of do it with our family. You know, again, are there things that we need to be aware of? Major things going on? Who, you know, again, it's a little less critical now because it's not school time. But just what's going on that we need to know about? What are we going to do for dinner? Do we need to get groceries? You know, just who's going to take care of that? All of those little things I think are important. And opening up the floor to the kids. In fact, maybe even giving them responsibility, giving them a job. You know, chores are one thing, you know, take out the trash, empty the dishwasher, whatever, they can do those chores, but sort of giving them like a family responsibility. Hey, do you want to run the family meeting? Do you want to talk about something that's on your mind? So sort of giving them a role in the family may help open up those lines of communication because, you know, frankly, sometimes teens just shut down. You know, even my own said, no, I'm fine. Well, I know you're not fine. I can tell you're not fine, but they don't always want to talk about it. So sometimes sort of giving them a specific role is helpful in that.
That's great. Thank you. And then I guess this kind of goes along with it. How do you feel like, are there ways that we can strengthen our family during this time? You talked about, you know, routines and family game night and, you know, board games and dinners and things like that. But, you know, what if you announce it's time for a family dinner so everybody sits down, but they're in a bad mood? Or, you know, you sit down for a family game night, but, you know, one of the teens doesn't, you know, want to be there. Are there ways that, you know, we can strengthen our family that, you know, maybe we have, like, that might even be counterintuitive, things we haven't thought about, but things we might try?
Yeah, I think it's, you know, we're all having to get creative right now. You know, one of the things, it was kind of an interesting exercise that we did with our kids last weekend. We used to go to Disney a lot. That was just one thing that our family did. We had season passes. We'd go for a weekend. We'd do the Disney runs. That was just kind of our thing. We obviously haven't been doing that. So we gave each kid kind of a task. What do you miss? What do you feel like you want to get back to, and sort of try to figure out how to recreate that in some way. Like you said, if game night isn't flying, you know, sometimes people are not in the mood to play Monopoly or Clue or whatever. So maybe asking your kids, what do they miss about their old life? You know, and trying to find some creative way to recreate that and including them in the process. I found that I do that a lot. You know, I'm the parent, this is what you have to do, here's your schedule, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't, particularly when they turn into teenagers, they're just like, I want to do that. And it's hard to force, right? You can't force your kid to participate in family board game night if they don't want to participate. You just can't force it. And that's where I would say, okay, fine. You know, you don't have to participate. Maybe give them a choice. Say, you know what? Here are 3 family activities that I think would be fun. What do you guys think? Choose one, choose 2. Let's vote. Give them a say. Because a lot of what's happening right now for all of us is that we don't feel like we have control. All of this is out of control, and the kids feel that way even more. You can't go to camp. You're not going to school. You can't do X, Y, or Z. So control is being really taken away from them. So whatever we can do to give them control, whether it's choosing dinner, whether it's choosing which pizza place we get takeout from, you know, whatever that is, whether it's choosing a family activity, maybe you let them make that a project. Say, hey, we want to do something that's going to increase our family time together. You know, you didn't like my suggestion. Why don't you plan something? Not in a mean way, but, you know, letting them sort of be part of that process.
Good. Thank you. I like that a lot. The idea of giving the kids, you know, some sense of control, when really, I think for all of us, feel like control has been taken away. But maybe
Absolutely.
it does hit, you know, them harder than we might have thought about. I feel like rightfully we've been talking a lot about our kids and what they need. But I want to take a minute, if we could, to talk about maybe what we need. How can
Yeah.
we leave time and room for self-care, not just as parents trying to care for our children, but as people, with our own worries and stresses, you know, who need to care for ourselves too. How can we leave time and room for that?
Yeah, and that's actually an amazing question, because that was one of the articles I read, again from ACAP, from the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, was talking about when you're working with families during this. That's the first thing you ask is, how is everybody in the family doing? You know, how are you doing with your job? You know, if my family, my husband's dental office was closed for 2 months, you know, gosh, that must be really stressful, right? So sort of understanding that parents are going to have their own stuff to deal with, right? Um, I am a big fan of trying to schedule self-care, whether it's, you know, a jog in the morning, which is something I do, meditation. I recommend pretty much almost to everybody. My own kids have been trying it. There's a number of really good meditation apps. Headspace is one of them. That's just the one I'm most familiar with. Headspace is actually available, I believe, to educators. Dan, am I right? For free?
Oh,
Not
it,
sure. He's not sure. Um, but it's available to mental health people for sure. But even if it's not available for free, it's pretty cheap. It's like $5 a month or something. It's not, certainly not the only meditation app, but it's something that's really nice, because you can take, it doesn't have to be a half hour. It can be 5 minutes of doing breathing, of doing relaxation, turning off your phone, turning off your iPad, turning off CNN, turning off whatever, and just breathing, because I think we're all, you know, forgetting to do that. You know, I sometimes suggest to people to make a to-do list. You know, give yourself one physical outlet, whether it's taking a walk, taking a jog, going for a bike ride, whatever. Family, no family, by yourself, whatever. I like to run by myself, because I can just sort of be in my own headspace and not have to talk to anybody and not have to think. Some people don't like that. Some people choose other things, but I think it's really, really important to schedule that into your day. And, you know, communication with your partner. I think that's, you know, for those of us that, you know, have partners, married spouses, whatever, you know, that is something that I personally know that I have to make time to do that. I talk all day. That's my job. So sometimes at the end of the day, I'm like, don't talk to me. But that's not always good. You know, that's not always good for family communication. So I think as parents, we really have to sort of look at those things that we like to do, that bring us joy, you know, whether it's, you know, watching a sunset or whatever, and just schedule them, because it's almost like if you don't schedule them, they don't happen.
thank you so much. I have just two more questions, because I know our hour is just about up, and I wanted to make sure to leave time for questions for others. So if you have ideas or questions you want to ask Dr. Lirio, if you want to start, you know, putting those in words or sending them in the chat, that'll be great. I just want to ask you a couple more, if that's okay. I know it's just the beginning of July, but, you know, at least for public school, it's just about a month before, in whatever form, school is supposed to start again. So looking ahead to the end of the summer and the uncertainty regarding the school routines in the fall, what do you feel, are there things that we should be thinking about and preparing for?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good question. And that's, you know, in talking about anxiety, that's certainly high on my anxiety list right now, because, you know, a number of us have kids that are transitioning, you know, to other schools. And in my case, you know, my oldest is going, you know, from the wonderful, comfortable environment of community day to a big high school. So that's sort of, you know, high on my anxiety list, and how to get him ready for that. And again, is this going to look a lot different? We don't know. Certainly there's some things that we know, in whatever way, shape, or form it looks like. There's going to be school in August, you know, whether it's online, whether it's brick and mortar, whether it's some hybrid, whatever that is, there's going to be school in August. So I think, you know, definitely getting kids ready for school is important. And so that's, you know, sleep routines. Again, that's probably the biggest thing a couple weeks before, trying to get back on a normal sleep schedule, trying to go to bed at a school time. You know, when you get up in the morning, even if you're not doing schoolwork, you know, read for 30 minutes, do your math facts, whatever that is, but do it sort of getting on schedule. Sleep is a big one. Buying school supplies, right? Again, trying to get into the mindset of whatever this is going to look like, school is happening. So what are the things that we need to do to get ready? We actually, I'm just thinking about school clothes. We were in Target today. Sophie and I were in Target with our masks on, and there, you know, all the school uniforms were there. And I started thinking, I'm like, are we going to need uniforms? Just as a side note, that was actually something that my husband had them do. This was his idea, not mine. They had to get dressed in their uniform every day for online school.
Wow.
You know, they had to get up, they had to get dressed. He said, no PJs, no work clothes, you're in your uniform. And so in a way, part of me was like, oh, I don't think that's necessary. But it was actually really helpful because it was a mindset thing. You're in school, you're in your uniform, even though you're not in the physical walls of school. So I think, yeah, routine, sleep schedule, getting, you know, getting school supplies. I am begging, bribing, pleading, whatever you want to say, with my 7-year-old to do her summer work. Again, I'm not worried that she's behind necessarily. I'm just more worried about, okay, it's really, really important to stay in that routine. And I think even now more than ever, because we've all gotten lazy. I mean, I'm sleeping later than I normally sleep for all of the reasons we've discussed. So I think a lot of those, and starting them soon, you know, starting them in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. And then my last question before I, you know, would open it up for other questions or for you, you know, anything I didn't ask that that I should have that you wanted to share. Is there any good news? What good news might come out of this time for tweens and teens and parents and families? I mean, given that anything good that comes out of it isn't worth all of the, you know, loss of life and all of the suffering. But given that is our reality, is there anything that we can, you know, is there any good news that we might find for our kids, for our families?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I've been sort of thinking that myself. I do think the fact that we've had to be home more it is a good thing for a lot of us that maybe felt like we were overscheduled, overly activitied, you know, rush. We've been forced to slow down. And the reality is, I think that's good for most of us. It's good for most of us physically. Like I said, I'm getting more sleep than I ever have. And also just emotionally. And I think it has opened the doors to have a lot of these real conversations with our kids, and also to model for them. That's one thing my mom taught me. I think she's still on the call, is, you know, we don't have to deal with this perfectly, particularly this, because again, there's no roadmap or template. But what we do want to model for our kids is how do we navigate a difficult situation? It's okay to not always be happy. It's okay to not have our smile on our face 24/7. You know, my kids have seen me shed a few tears over this whole situation, and that I think is actually okay, because you're modeling to your kids resilience. You're modeling, you know, that this is a scary, uncertain, stressful situation, and it's like that for everybody, and it's okay. Even moms and dads feel this way, but you're modeling, you know, sort of hopefully resilience and coping strategies. So I think that, you know, more family time and you know, the ability to just have more, you know, open communication, I think is really hopefully one of the good things that comes out of this.
Great. Thank you. I want to say thank you so much for everything that you've brought to us tonight, not just your wisdom, which is immense, but your compassionate way of delivering it, and really, you know, just really connecting, I feel like, with us as parents and with our kids, to give just such a wise and such a gracious view of everything. So I really want to thank you so much. If there are questions, people can, I guess, put them in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand. I think I figured out how to unmute people. So if somebody has something that they want to ask Dr. Lirio, if you want to either put it in the chat or if you want to raise your hand, I'd be happy to to unmute to call.
Can I ask one quick question? I have been
All right.
actually getting, I've not been really good. I've been sort of focusing on what you're saying. So I'm getting a lot of stuff in my chat. Some is to everybody and some is just to me.
Oh,
I
great.
guess, you know, for anybody that has sent me a question directly, I didn't know if you wanted it. I'm assuming if you sent it privately, you wanted it to be private. So I didn't know if I should maybe just give a way to contact me if any of those people wanted to contact me just privately
Oh,
without.
yeah, I was going to do that at the end if that's okay. I was
Okay,
going
that's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah.
I don't know if
Yeah.
I can, but I'm going to try to screen share your website. So yes, if you want to stay tuned, I'll make sure that everybody can say to contact Dr. Lirio offline. But if you had a question and you put her in the chat and you do want to share it publicly, I guess if you want to raise your hand, we can do it that way as well. Let's see. And while people might be thinking about that, I did see, I think Judy Tebow he put in asking, this is a great question, is child abuse on the uptick? I guess especially while people are isolated and, you know, not with, you know, teachers, guides, counselors, you might see, is child abuse on the uptick, and how can we as a community help to keep this at bay?
No, that's an excellent question. I don't want to quote statistics on that because I don't know. I would speculate that it certainly is, but I don't have numbers or statistics on that. It would be really interesting to see what the emergency room doctors are saying about that. I'm on a number of online forums, psychiatry forums, physician moms forums, COVID forums. I'm probably on too many forums at this point. But it would be interesting. That's an interesting question that I may pose to some of the emergency room physicians on my group and see. I would imagine the answer is yes, but I don't know.
Okay, thank you. If people are thinking about other questions, great. If not, bear with me. I'm going to open up my screen and try to screen share. So let's see how this goes. Hang on 1 second. Okay, share screen. And hope this works. Okay, can you guys see Dr. Lirio? Did it come up? Yes, I think so. So this is her website, and it is Family Cope, FAMIY Cope, COPE.com. And then if you click, you know, about us and click on Dr. Lirio, you'll get to her website. But this is the, if you just want to take a screenshot, there are 2 office locations and the phone numbers and things like that. So if anybody would like to speak, you know, more with Dr. Lirio offline, these are ways to contact her. So I'm just going to leave this up for Amit in case anybody would like to share. I mean, would like to write it down. And I just want to thank you once again, Dr. Lirio. This has been such a great evening and such a wonderful opportunity for us to learn with you. And I am very, very grateful. If there are people who are joining us who also have preschool or elementary school students, we will be back here a week from tonight on Wednesday, whatever, the 15th, is it? Yes, with my calendar. Wednesday the 15th at 7:30. And this time, Dr. Lirio will be in conversation with Community Day Head of School Dan Caesar to talk about parenting in a pandemic, especially for preschool and elementary school students. It is all free of charge, and Dr. Lirio has very generously donated her time and expertise. So we're really, again, we're really grateful to you for being here tonight and for everything you've done. I'm going to go back, if I can figure out, to my original, okay, there we go.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm again very, very honored, and I was very thrilled to be asked to do this. I know there's a couple there were a couple questions that I didn't get to, but I know it's getting late, so I don't know if the people that asked them maybe want. I'm happy to have them even call me directly on my cell phone. That's fine. I don't mind at all.
No, I'm the host of the meeting too. So there are people who, let's kind of officially end for those of you who need to go. And I'll just say, if you're interested in, you know, more events for that Temple Emanu-El is having, we are online for the foreseeable future. On Monday, we're gonna have another conversation with Dr. Tanya Schreibman, who is one of Sarasota's leading experts in infectious disease, who's going to talk to us about the pandemic, coronavirus, what we know, what we don't know, how to stay safe. And then we are coming up also with some more lighthearted events. We're going to have an evening of online comedy. We're going in August to have a magic show online. So all kinds of great stuff. And if you're interested, send me a message in the chat, shoot me an email, and I'll make sure you get all the information. And if you or anyone you know is looking for a fantastic school experience, preschool through the 8th grade. My kids were community day school kids. And if anybody wants more information about that, you can reach out to Amy Meese or to Dan Caesar or to Lindsay Sweeting. And we're really happy to be partnering with them tonight. So thank you to Community Day. Thank you to Dr. Lirio. If you need to go, it's been a great night. We've been thrilled to have you. And if you'd like to stick around for another few minutes and speak a little more intimately with Dr. Lirio, if you're available for a little while longer, we'd be grateful. So good night, and feel free to stick around if you'd like.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yay. And I'm going to unmute. Actually, I can't figure out how. I'm going to ask everybody to unmute themselves so we can talk a little bit, so we can speak a little bit better. So if you'd like to unmute.
Yeah. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Stephanie.
Oh, thank you. Who? I didn't hear who said that.
That was Lindsay.
Oh, that was Lindsay. Oh, I heard you, but I didn't see you. Thank you for being on.
Lindsay, thank you for the fabulous flyer and helping to spread the word, and really happy as always to be working with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, and good night.
Good night.
Hey,
Little
Steph.
ones. Yes.
Hey, Rabbi, first of all, Rabbi, thank you. You are a fantastic moderator, I have to tell you.
She is fantastic.
Thank you. That's super nice.
I know you said the American Academy of Pediatrics came out strongly for obviously to get kids back in school. Did your particular group, child and adolescent psychiatry group, have they made a statement to that effect?
No, it's interesting that you ask, because I've been monitoring their website and their Twitter feed, because they've been pretty active on Twitter. ACAP, again, without getting political, ACAP has been really outspoken on a number of sort of social justice issues, and advocating for children who've been traumatized by being away from their families for whatever reason. They've been speaking out against some of the racial injustices. They've been very outspoken about a number of issues. They have not yet made a statement on this, to my knowledge, unless they did today. The last time I checked, they hadn't.
Okay, it's interesting that they haven't yet. Waiting to see, you mean from a medical standpoint, you think? We're just waiting to see where the numbers are going? Is that, you think, what they're waiting for?
You're talking about ACAP, American Academy of
ACAP, yes.
I don't know what they're waiting for. I mean, I think the patient population that we deal with is sort of by definition more complicated, right? These are kids that, often have school issues, learning issues, depression, anxiety, et cetera, et cetera. And so it makes it complicated on a number of levels. Even if you have a quote unquote typically learning child, shall we say, this is a complicated issue. So I think if you've got a child that's struggling with anything, psychiatric or otherwise, it's a complicated question. So I don't know why they haven't made a statement. I'm not sure that they will. They can't really effectively speak to the infection piece, right? I mean, they're not infectious disease, they're not pediatricians. So
I would imagine if the general pediatrics is leaning toward thinking that it's important for the kids to go back full time, I would think that the general psychiatric would lean the same way, because I understand from a point of view from a child who already has issues, yes, but the average child, I think, psychologically would be doing more damage not being in school, because they have the social aspect and some sort of uniformity of being in a school and going and doing that. I would think psychologically it would be would behoove them to go to school. So I would think that they would probably follow suit. But
Yeah, yeah, it will be really interesting to see if they do make a statement on it, or if they are just sort of in the mindset of we're going to provide resources for whatever situation we're dealing with. They've have a lot of really fantastic stuff on their website, resources for family, handouts. I mean, I've been super impressed with what they've had. And I agree. I mean, look, and I just know from my own child, online learning was miserable for
yeah,
him. It was not pleasant. And that for him, the idea of starting high school online is not appealing.
right.
And I think what we're sort of just trying to figure out as parents, as doctors, as community members, is what is safe, what is reasonable. I think the concern now is that there's no, well, at least as I understand it, there's no way to sort of hybrid any of this, right? To sort of do some combination that might be good for kids. It's sort of either all or nothing. And for a lot of kids, Florida virtual is not an ideal option. So this is a really, really, really stressful topic. I mean, as you can tell, I'm sort of ruminating about it 24/7 for my own kids at this point. So
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I think in an ideal world, yeah, I mean, if we could, if we could do it in a way that was safe, I think, yeah, it would be better for them to be back in school.
I think it also is, I mean, every family and every child is obviously different. Some kids did fabulously well on e-learning and have decided not to go back to school because they did so well with it.
Yeah.
Others, who might have ADHD or whatever, just online does not work. And they depression set in because they started to do so poorly in school because they didn't have the instruction from a teacher, and so on and so forth. So I mean, it was like a rolling ball effect. It just got worse and worse and worse as the semester went on.
It's a downward spiral. And I think for those kids that weren't doing well, that weren't successful in online, they weren't getting good grades. It was very, it felt negative. Then you just sort of tune out, right? If you're not getting any positive reinforcement, what's the motivation to keep working?
Yeah. So, yeah. Every family's a little different. Yeah.
Every family is a little different. And that's what I keep telling myself is that, everybody is going to make a choice that works for their family, and that their choice isn't maybe necessarily my choice or my choice.
Right.
And that's okay. Because we're all just sort of trying to figure this out now.
Yeah. That was what I struggled with a lot at the beginning with this. So obviously Abby is the one with ADHD and did not have a good end of the school year, where my other daughter, Natalie, is very driven and very, very bright, wants to go into the medical field, and was very into this in the beginning medically, like wanted to know more about everything and how this is all working and affecting us. And it actually got to the point, Natalie and I have a very good relationship, and our relationship was really starting to get affected because this is a child who I never had to do anything, like and then all of a sudden I'm giving her restrictions and telling her, no, you can't do this. And I never experienced that with her because I never had to tell her not to do something or to do something, and there was a little backlash there that I wasn't used to, because none of us have ever parented this, and none of our parents have ever parented this, at least some sort of something to go on. So I was at such a loss, educationally with my younger one and all that. But with my older one, I never had such a negative experience with her, because I just didn't know what I was doing. And I like to be in control. And obviously there's no control here. So, I mean, everything eased up. School ended and things are eased up a little bit. But we just kind of got used to it, I guess, in a way. But yeah, I mean, all sorts of things that I never thought I would. Who thought any of this would happen?
Who would have thought?
Yeah.
No, and I think you're right. And I think also having that transparency, and it sounds like you had that conversation with her of, I don't know how to do this. I don't know what I'm doing. Right. You know, and this is, you know, so we may not be doing this perfectly, and that's okay, but let's, you know, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Um, I know Rachel had a question. Did you want to ask? Or did
Sure.
you want me to sort of address it to sort of summarize maybe, or?
Yes, you can. Sure.
Okay, basically, and she said it was okay to share it. So basically, she was concerned that her teenager has sort of isolating, right, and sort of hyper focusing on what he or she
Yes. He.
is not able to do, right? You know, sort of normal routines. I can't do this, I can't, right? Is that I was, you know, spending, you know, things like, oh, you know, we used to be able to eat out or something along those lines, and trying to figure out how to navigate that, right? That trying to say, okay, what's really bothering you? You're not that worried about dinner, that kind of thing, but he wasn't necessarily responding to that redirection. Is that what you were asking?
Right. It seems like that food for him has just become like the topic. Maybe
Mhm.
that's something like you were speaking to of control, something
That's
that
right.
he feels like he can control.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much I just sort of ignore when he does it, when he goes into these deep dives about it, or if I respond to it. Like I liked your suggestion of giving, you know, control, like what is your idea for tonight and what should we plan and how should we do the menu and what do you want to put on my grocery list. And you know, we're big right now with trying to have healthy habits to just generally stay healthy during this sedentary time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's challenging. I mean, you know, I'm trying to give
Absolutely.
them little wins of like Morton's does an outside cookout on Wednesdays and that's
Yeah.
our Wednesday highlight, you know. But in general, you know, just how much of it do you ignore and how much of it do you address?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really, really good question. And, you know, definitely picking your battles. My son has decided to grow his hair. We all think it looks terrible. My mother wisely said, leave him alone. It's hair. So
Right,
so we're not going to pick that battle.
right.
It, you know, food is a little bit different, you know, because I certainly see a lot of kids where, you know, if it's an issue, it becomes an issue, right? In
Yes,
other words, the more you make it an issue, the more it's an
yes,
issue.
yes,
One extreme or the other. You
yes,
know, either the kids where you as the parent are really trying to sort of watch what they eat and then they're hiding food in their room or doing whatever, or the opposite extreme, right? They stop eating. And so you don't really want either of those extremes. And I think you absolutely highlighted it's about control. And this is something he feels like he can control right
right.
now. So you sort of take, you know, I think you sort of take that for granted and take it out of the equation and maybe try to refocus it a little bit. I wouldn't make it a huge battle. You know, you could lay some ground rules. For example, I had a family where, you know, the kid was eating cookies in the room, and you know there were bugs, you know, the ants were coming in the room, and the mom was like, I've told her 100 times, she's just not listening. And I was like, all right, well, that you can't really blame on COVID, right? You've
Right,
given her a rule, you've given her a guideline, and she's just not listening to it.
right.
So that might be something that you would consequence. And okay, well, there's ants in your room, maybe you need to help me pay for the exterminator, you know, something along those lines, you know, sort of a consequence that's appropriate to the situation. You know, in the situation you're describing, some of it may be redirect, you know, try to redirect in the way that you can, you know, like you said, meal planning. Is he interested in cooking? Is he interested in shopping with you? Is he interested, you know, giving him some choice, some control, you know, Pinterest, finding recipes, that kind of thing, online cooking classes. You know, you sort of have to think a little bit creatively,
Right,
knowing that he's trying, yeah, this is what he's trying to control.
right.
And you know, if it's not to the exclusion of other things, you know, maybe you don't fight that battle too much. If it's gotten to the point where he's meal focusing to the exclusion of absolutely everything else, then that may be sort of a bigger issue.
Right.
um
Yeah, I mean, I try to say, you know, no one likes this. Everybody misses like our family dinner at Carajulo's or wherever it is that we
yeah.
went that week. Everyone misses it. Everyone feels the same way. We can't wait to go back to it. But you know, we're doing it for our health right now,
Yeah.
and maybe trying to, like today I went up and talked to him. I'm reading the book that he just read so that I have something to connect with
To
him
talk, yeah.
to talk about other than the food conversations.
No, I think that that's fantastic. And, you know, if there's some other a hobby that he, you know, does he video game?
You know, he did a little bit, but he's kind of stopped. He'll like binge watch, you know, the season of Friends or The Office or some comedy to escape it, which is, you know, I'm letting him indulge that, because what is he going to do?
Exactly. And that's where maybe you find a show to watch together, or my husband took up Fortniting so that he had something to talk to the kids about. Fortnite, we could go on a whole nother tangent about that. But like, and I like the idea of the book or whatever, just trying to find stuff to connect.
Something else.
You know, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. That's sort of the redirection piece.
Right. And then I was telling Rabbi Glickman, we got the kids a dog because we were just like, the emotional love and support and responsibility and accountability, and not that it was like our first choice, but it's something now.
No, and that's good. I mean, if they've got a, you know, it's sort of like giving them a role and a responsibility.
Right.
I think that's, you know, and that's probably a more fun, okay, your job is to walk the dog, you know, it's probably a more fun chore than, you know, emptying the dishwasher.
Yes.
So, you know.
Yes. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fun times.
It's been interesting. It's been really interesting.
Thank you for doing this for all of us. It was
very sure. I hope it was helpful. It's, you know, again, what I try to be, you know, when I work with people, I try to keep it real. I mean, you know, I'm just going through this with everybody else. I just have a little extra knowledge in some certain areas, but you know, I'm a mom like everybody else trying to figure this out. So.
Well, thank you so much. It's been so great to be with you tonight. And Rachel, it was so nice to see you as well.
Nice to see you too.
It was really nice. And Liz Cook, I don't see your face or anything like that, but I'm glad you're here, you know, with us also. So.
Hi, Liz.
Hello. We'll go.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi there.
Hi, Liz.
Thank you, Dr. Lirio. This was a great session.
You're
This was
welcome.
really great.
I hope this was helpful, and thank you again, Rabbi Glickman. Thank you for having me. This was really it was fun.
It was great for us. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Good. Have a great night. Tell your family hi, and I will see you, I guess, you know, next week, if not before.
Same time, same station.
Same time.
Take care.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Hey, boys.